Hello.
Hello. I think that's everyone. Hi. All right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the ACEs and Masculinity panel. My name is Megan Carroll. I use she, her pronouns. I identify as a cisgender woman and panromantic asexual. I'm also a sociology professor who studies asexualities and gender. So I'm thrilled to host this panel where we can explore an intersection that doesn't get much attention in these communities. We have a range of panelists here to speak on their experience of asexuality and masculinity. If anyone in the audience has a question and you're watching live, you can type it in the chat or submit it on SliDo. And I believe there's quite a few questions already on SliDo that we'll get to talk about, and our moderator will be selecting questions to be shown to the panel. For now, though, I'd like to get started by asking each of our panelists to introduce themselves. Just please state your name, your pronouns if you're comfortable, how you label your gender and sexuality if you're comfortable, and anything else you'd like us to know about yourself. I think we'll go clockwise, starting with Nell.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that. Hi, I'm Nell, also known as Barefoot Backpacker. You can call me Nell or BB. I am asexual, quite romantic, and I describe my gender as demi-boy non-binary, but we'll probably talk about that a bit more later.
All right.
I also have a big passion for daisies, as you can probably tell. I'm wearing a daisy blouse.
Okay. Well, I'm Tiger Songbird. I identify as a cisgender man, pronouns he, him. I am aromantic, asexual, and I'm also a writer, blogger, and all around do everything for with regards to discussing about asexuality. You know, I'm also from America. I'm not actually from the UK, but I am from America, and I'm glad to be here.
Hi, I'm Adam. I identify as a cisgender man. My pronouns are he, him. I am a hetero-romantic asexual. I am touch favorable and sex averse. I am a student at Goddard College, sort of focusing very heavily on the entertainment industry, and I love stories, and I'm a writer and all that jazz. So asexual representation and stuff is very important to me, and I've also been studying a lot lately masculinity, so this has been a really important topic for me lately.
Oh, I guess it's me next. My name is Marshall Blunt, aka the Gentle Giant. I am asexual. I am a cisgender man, and I am an activist and photographer from Pennsylvania, United States.
I am David J. Bradley. My pronouns are he and they. I am aromantic, asexual, non-binary. I make YouTube videos about media, TV, theatre, films, communism, and also asexuality stuff, which a few people apparently have seen.
Yeah, last but not least, me. I'm Rob. Pronouns are he, him. Cisgender man. I'm demisexual, demi-romantic, pan-orientated. And I'm a software engineer, so I work I work a bit with Sarah, I can't remember, in the Aces in STEM Discord, talking about various things about STEM subjects, both online and in essays that I occasionally write when I remember to.
Great. Thank you all so much for being here. I want to dive directly into the questions. So let's have our first question. What do you think society gets wrong about masculinity? I think this was one of mine, but I'm really interested to hear what you have to say. So I say maybe if you want to start talking, just jump in. But if you want to be the next to talk, you can like raise a hand and I'll call on you next, or use the chat.
Anyone want to start?
I will.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I think I can. Well, I think it's hard to talk about masculinity without even talking about the context of which you're born in. For my end, I was born in. I'll discuss mine. I'm a guy born in the Bible Belt of the United States, which is right in basically the heartland area, middle section of the United States. So home state, Oklahoma. You couldn't spin in a direction and hit a church in my entire home city. So what they defined as masculinity was like, as soon as you get old enough, you have to, get married and start having children, and that's what that's what your whole entire life purpose is about. And that's, when you're grown up with that, it's basically like ingrained into it's drilled into your brain from a very young age that's what you're supposed to be, and that's what you have to do. And those are just things that are, expected of you to be. And I think that when you grow up with that, I know everyone else's experiences are going to be different from mine, but when you grow up with that and then you go off the script of that, there's a lot of different change. And there's just a lot of, it's almost like, I wouldn't say it was a grieving period because it really wasn't grieving, but when you just leave that world behind, it's like you've now, lost an entire group or community with it. So I think masculinity, what society gets wrong about it is that it is influenced by your cultural context. A lot of people think it's just like, it's within, or it's something that you just have to be, but it is influenced by cultural context because expectations surrounding it are different by other, by cultures differently. So I think that's one thing that I would say society gets completely wrong about it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense because I'm from like a pretty middle class area of the northeast of England, which is about as like far opposite as like I could be from your particular perspective. So it would be interesting to know like what the differences are and what the similarities are between that.
May I say something?
Go ahead.
So, somewhat connected to those. Well, I've got a couple things to say, but the first one is connected to those, which is one thing I think society gets wrong about masculinity is that if you are brought up in a liberal, accepting society with good role models, that you can fully just escape toxic masculinity and toxic male gender norms. I have always been in a society that, in a culture and a space that accepted, alternative forms of masculinity. But even within that context, even within that space, you can't fully ignore the messages that come from the wider culture. So I've still struggled to, process my emotions in a healthy way, for instance, so that, I think that's one big thing, is that no matter where you're from, if the wider culture in your country has those toxic male gender norms, they're very hard to escape, even if you grow up in an accepting environment. And same with, by the way, asexuality. Like, you still get those toxic messages, no matter where you're from. They may be better or worse depending on where you're from. They may be more severe, but they're still part of the culture of the world that you live in. And so, I think we need to acknowledge how hard these messages are to escape. I think that's a part of masculinity a lot of people get wrong. And the other thing I think a lot of people get wrong is that, about masculinity, is that having male privilege is a good thing. Because the problem is that while male privilege does give us a lot of benefits, the problem is that it is so easily lost. And so there is this constant pressure to maintain a certain image of masculinity, because if you branch away from that, you lose the male privilege. You know, and so what the privileges we're born with, I mean, the patriarchy itself is not actually helpful to men. It is toxic and unhealthy because it is so easy to lose as soon as you stop fulfilling these toxic gender norms. And I think that's really important to know, and that, you know, and generally, I think there is a perception that because men have these privileges at all this stuff, that we are that we don't need to be taken care of, that we don't need help. We have everything already, essentially, and we don't. What we don't have, we have a lot of societal benefits, but we don't have a lot of the things that actually allow us to create a fulfilling and good life, and allow us to be kind and empathetic to other people, right? Like there is this, obviously, this wide idea that men are the root of the problem, and that's not necessarily wrong, but there's a reason for it, and that reason has to be addressed, and that's not being addressed because we can't do it on our own.
Now, it looks like you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I was just listening to Adam there, and that's basically everything that I was going to say in answer to this question. It's like one of the things I was going to bring up. I don't know if there's going to be a question about it later, but masculinity for me has always been, and I don't hang around with men very often because of this. There's that overlap between masculinity and sexuality, and that society assumes that, you know, to be a man, to be a red, I was called once by a friend of mine not a red-blooded male, because I didn't have that kind of, effectively, the sex drive that is present in society, that like everything is advertised towards men. It's like, this will make you a better lover, this will make you good in bed. And that's alien to me as an asexual. It just doesn't make sense.
I feel that I find that mostly, again, when I've been within, like, say if I'm in like back when I was at school or university, or like in a working environment where, like, I used to work in hospitality, so when I worked with the security guards specifically, very much, there was always just a thing, like when like just 2 or 3 men get together, they suddenly start talking in like really demeaning, sexist ways about women in general, and it's just like I'm just sitting there like,
Yeah.
what? Why? Why are we saying these horrible things?
Yeah, I hate every time, like, they, like, when you do hang out with a group of people that are like that, they assume that you're gonna be like, yeah, I agree. It's just like, no, I don't.
Yeah,
It's also very heteronormative as well. It's assuming that your masculinity is going to be directed towards women. So I mean, certainly when I was growing up, being gay was seen as, well, you're not a man, you're just a woman in a dress. And that was how it would, when I was growing up in the 80s and the early 90s, that's exactly the words that they would have used. So masculinity is not just sexuality, it's heteronormative sexuality. And it's very much focused from, you know, day one of being a man. It's, you know, oh, you're 5 years old, you've got a female friend, is she going to be your wife? It's very much that focused. And that doesn't help men in general, even, you know, cishet men, because, I mean, you know that women are scared of us. And one of the aspects of that is because society makes women scared of us men, because everything is geared towards, that's what, it's all sex, it's all, that's what we want, in a way.
Right.
So,
may I?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, sorry.
I saw Tiger had something to say too. I want to make sure Tiger had a chance to speak.
I'll let Adam go ahead. Yeah, Adam, you go first on this one because I'm gonna wait. I want to make sure.
Okay. So, you know, I was just gonna say that, you know, there's an idea that, you know, I think, you know, we were talking about it earlier about stuff that is, you know, perceived as intrinsic to men, as part of us since we're born, when that's stuff like aggression and hypersexuality and the desire to dominate. And those are not traits we're born with. And you know, I think even those who are more understanding and empathetic, they, you know, it's hard for them to escape. Again, as I was saying earlier, it's hard for them to escape the messages that that is an intrinsic part of men, especially because there are a lot of men who end up conforming to those expectations, and thus it creates a feeling of fear that every time you're around a man, they're going to be a predator of some kind. And you know, and that fear, unfortunately, is valid, but it also creates a very toxic environment for men who are working to counter that message, because we have to work so hard to be considered a decent human being, because the intrinsic assumption is that we are aggressive, we are predatory. And so, you know, you can't really fault people for being afraid, because there are so many men that conform to that. But at the same time, it creates a very difficult thing for men who are working against that. And then, you know, combining with asexuality, you know, the idea of sexual dominance, it becomes very alien. And it becomes even harder, because you're being associated with something that that is so alien to you. And, you know, difficult for you to even imagine, let alone actually want to conform to.
Tyler, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was going on with the 90s point of saying it was the same thing in the 2000s when I was in high school. So the same thing that was going on when people were like, if you weren't this, you know, stereotypical, you know, hungry, you know, skirt chaser of a man, then you weren't really a real man. We always say, even in our language, we base manhood on like how many partners you've been with. Like they always say, like, he became a man today when he ended up, you know, getting his first time or something like that. Which for me, I guess in my case, I just never did, because I've never even done that. But just
Yeah,
going on record.
I just opted out and went non-binary instead.
Yeah, I said I guess I never became a man because I just never did that. But even on that case, even with the, I tend to hang out with a lot of girls as well. Even with the girls I hang out with, they tend to think it's weird when the guy isn't trying to get in their pants on like the second or third date, because it's just like it's so expected of men to just try or push or be so aggressive that they just think that's what men are supposed to do. And I always say it like this, regardless of asexual or not, those expectations do harm men who aren't asexual, because because when we, like, for our sake, like, I know, like, I was assumed every single place I've been at, I've been assumed to be gay. So every single job I've been at, every school I've been at, I've been assumed to be gay, because I just wasn't, you know, trying to hunt, I guess. And it's just never been part of my code. I just never really wanted to do that. That's, you know, being aromantic and asexual. But even with like my guy friends, they always feel like, man, it just feels really difficult, because it's like they keep thinking I'm trying to get with them, but I'm not. And it's like, you know, trying to be friends with a girl, it's like, I'm just trying to be your friend, not trying to be anything more than that. But they always think there's something of an ulterior motive behind your, you know, friendliness. And that is one of the things we always have to say about like what society gets wrong, is that it doesn't just hurt us as asexual men. Obviously it hurts us huge, right? But it also hurts all men.
For sure.
And it's, our problems are your problems. Like, we're not just speaking for ourselves as asexual, and then it's like an entire subsection category. We are part of it. We all have to live in it.
Marshall, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where, like, when I got tested for the panorama, I don't want to say the obvious word, but where someone literally actually told me, "Oh yeah, you're a man because you didn't react badly to getting something shoved up your nose." And I'm like, what's this have to do with being a man? And it's just like, growing up in the Rust Belt, it's the same way. It's the same way here as it is in the Bible Belt, where it's because you're viewed as a certain way, you have to conform to heteronormative ways. Where if they even hear like when I start painting my nails regularly, people are like, "Why are you painting your nails?" It's kind of like it's because it's something I want to do. It's it doesn't chip away who I am and stuff, but it's just people view it as you being less of a man here, and it's very irritating.
Yeah, so
painting my nails for the first time felt like a weirdly big step when I did it. Even though, like, when you think about it on paper, it's a really simple thing. It's just a bit of colored chemicals, looks nice. But taking that step for the first time was like, I'm actually doing this. I've just thought about this for years, and now I'm actually doing it. Holy shit!
And I find it that a lot of people, a lot of women actually, when they see me out with because I usually paint my nails black, and they're like, "Oh, I love your nails. The only criticism they'll give me is you paint outside the lines a little bit." I'm like, "Yeah, I have trimmers, so I can't help myself." But but when it's other men, it's always like, "So how long are you gonna have this nail stuff on, or do you have to do this?" And I'm like, and I'm the type of person that would outwardly say, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna do as much as I want. I don't care if to the point where my nails fall off."
yeah, it sounds like what I'm hearing from you all so far is that there's like the patriarchy creates a hierarchy of men, and that the ideal masculinity is very heterosexual, very hypersexual, and anyone who doesn't measure up to that gets like lower status, which I think is a really important point. I want to move on to the next question because I think that this is all really good and generative. How can a person's perceived masculine traits conflict their ace traits? Does this lead aces to some degree renounce either masculinity or aceness? This was a really popular question in SliDo. So
so I'd say we had something in this in the first question where we were talking about again the perceived like sexuality that comes with being a man, or like presenting masculine is, again, people will look at you and they will think that, oh, that's a guy, he must be constantly thinking about sex. And so I found like once I started embracing my asexuality and aromanticism more, and just like I realized the only thing that I'm doing my like gender for is myself, since it's not like, I'm not trying to attract anyone. I don't want to do any of that. And that kind of helped me figure out myself out in my gender as being non-binary, because it was just like, yeah, I'm just being me for myself. I'm not being me with a goal towards anyone else in that way.
I'd have to say probably this was one of the hardest parts about my journey and journey discovering being asexual. Probably was figuring out being asexual and a guy, and breaking down all of the negative, what I call deconstructing, like my own masculinity, because I was so force fed the belief that, oh man, this is how I gotta be. This is what I was taught to be, and leaving all of that behind and deconstructing. Now I came back to still, I'm still cisgender, I'm still a man, and that's what I identify as. But
it's a process of unlearning.
Yeah, it's like a deconstruction, even of your own self. Like, okay, now you just have to rebuild the pieces back. I never, like, being asexual helped me discover me and becoming a better version of me, in my opinion. And I totally wouldn't, like, it was not an overnight thing. It was this took a few years type of thing. But, breaking down those pieces helped me discover like exactly what I like, who I am, what I do, what I like to do, what I'm about, and what are my personal beliefs and what are my personal convictions, and just not going with the rest of the crowd anymore. Because for so long, when you're told this, you're like a follower and this is what you gotta follow. And now, I say, I'm bucking the trend now. And I'm just like, I'm not going to be afraid to do that anymore. If I don't do something that's not masculine by your standard, so be it. And now I'm feeling more confident in that. It took years to get to that level.
Great. Adam, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah. So, for me, really, my entire life, long before I knew I was asexual, I have always just not really conformed to traditional masculine perceptions. But I also, but the thing is, I'm not gay, right? I'm not straight, but like a lot of the things that are, that are directly associated with being gay are my inherent traits. And then there's, so there is like an insecurity and the fear, not of being perceived as gay, but as being perceived as someone who I'm not. So not gay specifically, but just like that's not who I am, and I want to be seen for me. And so, and I am very big and strong. Those are things I have that are, and it feels there is a fear of mine that I'm going to be perceived as a threat due to being big and strong. And also the fact that I try to be kind and empathetic all the time, and I'm worried about that coming across as flirting. And so those ideas of masculinity and what men are supposed to be very much conflict with things that I connect to my asexuality, which are things that have distanced me throughout my life, even long before I knew I was ace, from traditional masculine traits, and creates a deep insecurity and conflict within myself about being perceived as someone or something or wanting something that has nothing to do with who I am, both in terms of being perceived that way and also not being able to fulfill those expectations of who I am, even though I don't want to. It's a very, very complicated existence.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Rob, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, kind of along the same lines of, well, both Adam and Ty really, is sort of came out of a long-term relationship, about 5 years, and absolutely wrecked by it. But that meant that I discovered who I truly was as a demisexual man. And part of that was questioning gender and masculinity and how that ties in. And like Tiger just came back to, no, I am cisgender man. I will always be cisgender man. But I don't care how masculine I look. I have a beard. I'll drink beer in the pub with the lads. But as far as that goes, that's as far as my masculinity goes. And again, like Adam says, I'm really empathetic. And sometimes I do have to say, no, I'm not flirting with you. I'm just empathizing. And I will do that naturally. So it can be annoying and nice to not have to conform to masculinity.
Nell, I think you had something to say too.
Yeah, I grew up, and with hindsight, I grew up basically, I was trying to be heterosexual and failed at it, is the way I've kind of described it. I've been in long-term relationships. I've been engaged to women. But what I've noticed is, and I've noticed this throughout my entire life, is that because I'm not sexual, and I only discovered the word asexuality about 10 years ago, but it fitted exactly entirely. Throughout my life, I've always had more female friends than male friends. I've always got on more with women than men. And there was, when I was a teenager, I had pen pals, lots of female pen pals, and they used to ask me questions about men and masculinity and basically why are boys? Because they assumed that A, I knew, and B, that I wasn't trying to get with them. So I don't know if I've always had this vibe of not quite masculine that I've just never realized until more recently. And what's also true is that sometimes people do clock me as gay. Certainly where I used to work, the canteen staff basically said, and this will be lost on a lot of the audience, the canteen staff said that I reminded them of Kenny Everett, who was a very camp 1970s, 80s DJ and TV presenter. And I kind of like that vibe because it makes me less masculine. It makes me less traditionally masculine. And being in that space means I'm more comfortable because it means that people are clocking me for my asexuality rather than the fact that I'm clearly a man. What I will also say, though, is that in the last couple of years, I've had discussions with people on a Discord server about asexuality and gender. And it seems that things that they were saying made sense with hindsight. So I started to query my gender identity because I couldn't easily determine what was my asexuality talking and what was my non-masculinity talking when it came to relationships with women and attitudes towards, the way I dress and what have you. So I felt after those conversations that yes, I probably was closer to being non-binary than being actually male. So hence why I call myself a demi-boy. Being a man and being he, him pronouns is just far too ingrained. I've been doing it for 47 years and I can't stop doing that. So I tend to use they, he pronouns. And I get a thrill from being a they, them, but equally I know I can't, I'm still connected to masculinity. I'm just connected by a bit of a thread. And I do wish, I was thinking about another answer to the previous question, and it's related. I dress very non-binary. I really like dungarees and things like that that are kind of gender neutral. And I just wish society would let men wear skirts because they're absolutely fantastic, especially in humid weather.
Oh, they're so comfy.
Absolutely. Things, shall we say, things stick less. And that's all I'm saying. You know what I mean.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where, like, throughout my 20s, I started to go out on my own, like to bars and cafes, and because in a way, before I came out, I dressed more what people will probably perceive as more masculine, where basically I would get like people who seem to forget the meaning of the word boundaries in a way. But I think as time went on, especially now I'll be 30 in less than a year. I've gotten to the point where I just don't give a damn but because of that, a lot of people have very varying attitudes towards it, where people are like, oh, you're 30, you should be married, you should have kids. And you have people who are like, aren't you afraid you're gonna just grow old by yourself? I'm like, no, there are 8 billion people in the world. Why would I be alone? How am I gonna be alone? But it's just one of those things where I wish society would just stop judging people before they meet people. That makes sense. It's especially when when you get into spaces where you, like a job, for instance, where you can't leave when you want, where people just perceive you how they want, and it's very annoying. Like I do get people who perceive me as being hetero, but when I tell them I'm not, it's like breaking news, and it's just like very weird.
David?
Yes, I just wanted a quick thing on what Tiger and Rob said about kind of deconstructing and thinking about their masculinity, and then still landing on like, I am still a cisgender man. I think that's a very valuable thing for people to think about. That when questioning your gender, it doesn't have to be with regards to like, oh, I must be trans, I must be non-binary, but like that you can still think about those things and what is ingrained in you, what is learned, what you can deconstruct and unlearn, and still come out the same person in a way. And I think that's a valuable thing that more people, like more cis people in particular, need to think about, that they can stop and ask questions about what my gender is and what it means.
I just wonder if that's more common amongst asexuals, because if you're already querying not just your sexuality, but the fact that you can break the sexual binary, whether that means you're then more open to breaking the gender binary.
Adam?
Certainly for me it was. Again, like long before I even knew I was asexual, I also like had a lot more female friends when I was younger. And you know, even as I grew older, I just connect with females more. Why? I don't know exactly, but for some reason there's a part of me that connects with women more than I ever did with men. I have I've had male friends, but you know, but there is a part of me that is not that already knew, kind of deep within, that I wasn't part of this masculine culture, and that helped me over time be more objective about that masculine culture because I already wasn't part of it, and so I could look at it a little more objectively. Obviously, as I said, there's still stuff that leaked through, but you know, I can question it. I can question masculinity more than someone who could actually intentionally fully conform, because there's a part of me that could never conform.
Rob, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, just a little bit to what Adam and a few people were saying. Again, lots of female friends growing up, and because of that, everyone presumed I was gay, which just became a thing everyone said, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to accept that, even though at the time I was like, I'm straight. But I think this is partially, once I realized I was pan, is I connect to people who feel genuine, and most men, to me, there's often something that's just not genuine about them when I meet them. They're trying to be something they're not, because of society and patriarchy and everything. Whereas women tend not to have that issue in society. They can be who they want to be. And I subsequently connect with women more.
Thank you so much for sharing. Did anyone else want to jump in before we move to the next question? Oh, Tiger, was your hand up too? Maybe we should use the chat from now on instead of the hand system. That was my fault. Sorry.
No, I think we're good. I think we're good to move to the next question. I think actually Rob pretty much said what I was going to say on that one. So I kind of just echoed and agreed. Yeah.
Great. All right, next question then. Oh, we've done that one. Let's see. Oh, okay. I'm glad to see this one. What can ace community spaces do differently to be more welcoming of men or masc aces? I even wondered if this is the first time for all of you being in the same like space with this many men or ace men or masculine folks. Marshall, if you want to jump in.
It definitely will help that help not to assume when people come to the space. It's like one of those things where I will come into a group and it's just like, oh, you must be trying to figure yourself out, when that's just not the case. I already know who I am. That was one of the perceptions I came across when I started entering ace spaces when I first came out.
Interesting.
I honestly just think the main thing is so many people don't even think asexual men even exist, because it's just that, you know, the whole sexuality thing of, well, if I think we have to break down the differences, and I always have to talk about this on my Twitter pages or whenever I talk about in my writing as an asexual person. It's like the hardest part about accepting that you're asexual and a man is that you still have the male parts about you, and people think, well, you can't be a man if you obviously have the arousal factor, like you know, I not to get into lurid details, but obviously, the arousal factor things tend to, as we were talking about, stick and just, we have body parts down there, but it's, talking about, the differences between attraction, libido, arousal. People tend to get those really confused. Like, how can you be that if you even feel that way? It's like, first of all, I hate to get, into a TW, but you know, a, a victim of assault can be aroused. And that's not to say they wanted it or they were asking for it. That's just biologically or physiological. That just tends to happen. That's unfortunate. I hate to put that in there, but that is the deal. All right.
I think Rob was next in the chat, and then Adam, did you have something to say too after Rob? I'll go with Rob first.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I think
Marshall also has his hand up.
Yeah. I want to talk about demis specifically, because that's my experience. But there often comes this preconception that not only can men not be asexual, they definitely cannot be demisexual once people understand what that means, because there's this whole idea that men also cannot be emotional, which I'm not going to go into that side of things. But I think I forgot where I was going with this. That's right, yeah. Being demisexual can also, you go into an ace space and you say demi, and then a lot of ace people can just suddenly just go, no, you're not ace enough, or throw you out of the community. You really have to fight for your place there, which shouldn't be a thing. You should just be accepted with open arms.
Yeah, I think that's probably the thing that this question is getting at mostly is there is a fair bit of gatekeeping in some ace spaces. Like they'll often, again, a lot of the main voices who speak out about ace stuff are women, which is like obviously they have every right to do that, but like a lot of men tend to get kind of pushed aside for them. But again, what I find is that once you actually like get in the spaces properly, people are very welcoming. There is a lot of very good, kind people in the ace community that I've found who are welcoming to men, but there is always that kind of, there's like an anxiety there with it sometimes.
Yeah, you have to get past that first layer in essence.
Adam, did you want to jump in?
Yeah. So what I found is that there's a lot of very casual, unintentional erasure for not just asexual men, but a lot of different asexual experiences. Like there is a lot of validation going around for, say, like, there's a lot of posts about like, oh, asexuals can have sex. Like some asexuals do want sex. And it's like, yeah, that's great. I'm glad you're validating them, but there's so much of that. Like this massive course correction because the initial assumption was that, well, you're asexual, you don't want sex. And now there's so much validation in the other direction that it ends up feeling like, wait a second, am I not valid? Are you saying that's more common? And I just want to do a bit of a trigger warning here. I went through this relationship for 3 years, in which I was sexually coerced. And I feel even in a lot of ace spaces, I get very afraid of discussing that because I worry that people will not understand how painful and complicated it was as a man. And I also worry about, parts of my identity getting invalidated or erased, which then will connect to the struggles I did have with that coercion and feeling not valid in going through it when I didn't even feel like, wait, could men be sexually coerced? So there are all these very difficult experiences I have, and even when asexual environments are more welcoming, and some of them are, there is a real fear that part of me and part of my struggles will not be respected or validated. Or even if it is by some, there will be someone who comes along and says, well, that doesn't seem real. And I think I think we need more people to pay attention to examples of people who are casually erasing. I think that's a big thing that aspect communities can do. Is when people who are educated among the many different variations of these experiences can pay more attention to moments of casual erasure, and make sure to like if you're in a group and you see someone saying you know saying something about widespread experience of aces, just comment and say, oh, and by the way, people who don't have that experience are valid too. It's a small thing, but it really helps. And just paying more attention to that kind of thing, and chiming in and helping make sure that no matter what experience is being talked about, no other experience feels excluded.
All right, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Marshall, you want to jump in?
Yeah. Basically, as a African American asexual, I usually, when looking through community spaces, I often find that it seems to be a lot harder for people to take you seriously when you are on an intersection of being a Black man in these spaces. Well, when you're Black in that space in general, and I worry about as time goes on, when there is more uh, uh, male representation in the ace community, that it's going to be dominated by primarily white men, because oftentimes we Black and brown men get left behind in spaces like this.
Yeah, I actually wrote about an article related to being Black and asexual. I wrote an article for LGBTQ Nation about why it's important to have Black and asexual representation, especially as I was growing up. I remember there weren't any characters of any kind that were in, you know, media or any sort of uh, figure I could look at and say that looks like me. I just remember when Connor Hawke was just um, came out as asexual this year, and they're going to do the DC comics for him being asexual. I would have loved to have had that, but I know that on my end, I didn't have anybody who was Black, male, and asexual. All of the Black men that I was looking at, there were like two different dichotomies. You were either Carlton from The Fresh Prince, or you were the Fresh Prince, as in Will Smith. You were either the player, getting all the girls who was cool and everyone wanted to be like him, or you were the nerd or the dork and no one wanted to be that. And you know, when you're left in those two worlds and you have no variance, you have no wiggle room, it's very hard for someone like a kid who was like me growing up to find his place or find his space. That's why I feel like having, you know, varied representation, diverse representation so matters, especially with regards to that representation being of men. Having Black men and representation of asexuality would have been so huge for me growing up as a kid.
Great, thank you so much for sharing. And Tiger, I linked to an article of yours in LGBTQ Nation. I don't know if it's the same article you were discussing, but in the Discord, anyone can come to the Discord and read that article you were talking about. We're almost out of time, so I thought we could wrap up with maybe some concluding thoughts. If there's anything you didn't get to say that you want people to know, anyone can jump in, and then we'll say goodbye after that. Nothing. Okay. We covered a lot of ground.
I think Adam has something.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I couldn't with the blur. Couldn't see it. Go ahead.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Well, I just want to say that, I just want to say that I think that, as I was saying, that the masculine experience, no matter who you are, whether you're, trans, whether you're masculine presenting, but, non-binary, whether you're heterosexual, heteroromantic, like I am, I'm heteroromantic. The masculine experience, and I just want to say that toxic masculinity is not a only men problem. It is a systemic issue that is perpetuated by everyone as much as something like racism or homophobia. And I think we need to really treat it as a systemic issue that is present within every society and every culture, or I should say every sub-society and subculture within a patriarchal society. And I think that what we've been discussing here today really shows how wide-ranging these masculine gender norms that are so harmful to men are. Everyone on this panel has tremendously different experiences, and we've all suffered from patriarchal expectations, and those expectations come from everywhere, not just other men, from everyone. And so I just want to make a statement that we all have a part to play in deconstructing societal norms for men. And if we can do that, I think a lot of the problems in society will move in a better direction, because right now a lot of those problems come from men who never learn to deconstruct their toxic masculinity. And I just wanted to make sure I said that.
Well said. Thank you. Anyone else? Concluding thoughts?
It's hard, isn't it? Because, and it's all, as you say, Adam, it's all tied in with patriarchy. I did a whole blog on this. It's all tied in with patriarchy, but the people that benefit from it are the people with the power. And no matter what happens, it's generally always rich white men. And rich white men surround themselves with power and money, prestige, and it's hard to touch them. And we'll get there. But it's definitely in our interest to try and smash the patriarchy as much as it's in everybody else's.
Absolutely. Does not help us.
And the other thing about that is that the longer there is that patriarchal view, the more that people like us will be, I want to say marginalized, and I don't know if that's quite the right word. People will assume that we're just the same as every other man because they don't have the visibility, there's no representation for us that much. So people will assume, it's like, if we're walking down the road and there's a woman ahead of us, that woman does not know anything about us, but that woman will assume that we are a threat. Even though we know we're not, she does not.
And you can't blame her for that.
Exactly. And that's the point. That's society's fault for tarring us all with the same patriarchal brush. And we have to change that.
Tiger, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think concluding thoughts, what we've all really jumped in and said is we've all spoken about how shackling, being tied to tropes, stereotypes, archetypes of what masculinity has been taught to us, how confining it has been to try to live into that, and that there's freedom in being the nonconformist. There is true freedom that does exist from that. I think if I were talking to 17-year-old myself when I was just questioning and looking around and wondering who I was when I was 17 and not really sure, if I'd have had someone in my ear be like, yeah, you don't have to be like that. You don't have to be like these, stereotypes of what, that aren't even real or based in reality, but are basically perpetuated to, further along negative views of us as men and what masculinity is. You can be your own person. I would have been glad for that. But what I would love to say is that to anyone who's out there who is questioning, or maybe is even thinking about it, or maybe it's just not even asexual themselves, but doesn't feel like they live up to those expectations, is that you can be free of those. You do not have to live to those. You do not have to, be forced to have to live in such a confined, constraining way of being a guy or whatever you want to be. You can be what you want. You can be who you truly are. You can be authentic. And I think that's something that's truly freeing. That was the freedom that I found by being asexual. What I would love people to know is that I found freedom in being asexual in more ways than I could possibly have counted. I'm so grateful for it. And there's joy in that. We've talked a lot about our sorrows, but I also want to talk about our joys in that as well.
Beautifully said. Thank you. Last word goes to Marshall.
Yeah, I just wanted to say very quickly that if you are hearing this and you're an asexual guy out there navigating these spaces, that know that you're valid and that you're awesome and you're not broken.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much to all of our panelists. This was such a wonderful discussion. I encourage everyone to keep the conversation going in Discord. I know there were a lot more questions that we didn't have time for, but thank you so much to each of you for being here and sharing your experience and sharing your perspective. Anyone watching, thank you for watching this. If you can please contribute to the conference fundraiser, it's in the description on the YouTube live stream. And thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Bye. Thank you.
See ya.